this, isn't it? We're just going to know that that's CnH2, and I suppose you could work it out if you drew a few of the alkenes. You should be able to draw ethene, propene, butene, pentene quite easily with the practice that we've done on that. We need to know the definition of homologous series. Homologous series are families of molecules that have the same functional group, but they differ as you go through the the series by CH2 each time. So as you go from ethene to propene to butene, you add CH2 each time. So that's not true. What happens as they gradually get longer is their intermolecular forces between molecules get gradually stronger, and so the trend in physical properties changes. So there is a trend in physical properties. So it's not very well worded, but that's that one there. The thing that's similar about them is that they have different chemical properties. Sorry, the thing that's not true about them is that they have different chemical properties. So they all behave the same way, more or less. So alkenes, whether it's ethene or propene or butene or any other alkene, will react, say, with bromine water in the same way, making it decolorize. Okay, so question 3, you need to know that alkenes can react, and we'll practice this quite a lot before we do any kind of assessment on it. But you need to know the reaction of, for example, ethene with hydrogen. It's one of those addition reactions we've written out and practiced a couple of times. You're expected to know that it's done with a nickel catalyst and at about 60 degrees. So B is the answer there. I'm afraid it's just knowledge, isn't it? And then you're asked to draw butene. First thing to do with these is draw the number of carbons that it is. So 4 carbons, and then stick a double bond somewhere. I don't mind where you put the double bond because it doesn't say in the name where to put it, but a good place to put it is at the end, and then we just make sure every carbon makes 4 bonds in total. So the ones either side of the double bond would look like that if you've drawn the double bond there, and then these ones would be like so. Okay, so 4 carbons, 1 double bond, and then all the carbons making 4 bond. The common mistakes here is that you end up with an extra hydrogen here, or perhaps an extra hydrogen here. Okay, sometimes people miss them off the end as well. To hydrate an alkene, if you take an alkene and react it with water, so hydration, that's addition of steam. And when you add steam to it, you add essentially adding H and OH to the molecule, H to one of the 2 carbon atoms on the alkene and OH to the other, and you end up with an alcohol. What are the conditions for that? Well, you need to know it's steam, and ideally you would know also that it's an acid catalyst, specifically phosphoric or sulfuric acid would do the job there. That's quite a detailed one. I wouldn't be surprised if people remembered the steam but didn't know which catalyst to use. Bromine water is the test for alkenes, and they go from orange to colourless. That's usually well known. Very common question. And you've come across this before when you did cracking. One of the proofs that cracking has worked is that you've generated an alkene, and you know that because you've got bromine water being produced, because that bromine actually adds to, reacts with the alkene. Alkenes undergo addition reactions. They do. The whole idea of 2 becoming 1 and atom economy being 100%. And when you take an alkene like ethene and add chlorine to it, 1 chlorine goes to 1 carbon, the other chlorine goes to the other. So when you draw it out, you should be able to put 2 chlorines on there. You also need to be able to name this molecule too. So this is dichloroethane. It's called ethane now because it's changed its name because it's become an alkane. It's worth reminding ourselves how to do the enthalpy change calculations. Oh, we've got missed out a question, haven't we? So question 9 is the balancing equation. When you burn a hydrocarbon in oxygen, you always get carbon dioxide and you get water. And I put a 3 in front of the carbon dioxide because there's 3 carbons. And I'll put a 3 in front of the water because there's 6 hydrogens on the left. The only difficult bit here is really to balance the oxygen. So you probably get 3 marks for this, 1 mark for that, 1 mark for that, and 1 mark for balancing. The balancing, we've got to count up the number of oxygens we've got. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 7, 8, 9. 4.5 times 2 is 9, so that's the answer there. To work out the enthalpy change, the energy change, heat energy change when you do this reaction, what you do is you first add up all the bonds of the reactants and get a mark for that, then add up all the bond energies of the products and get an answer for that, and then you do the left hand side, take away the right hand side. So if you tot all these up, I'm not going to do it, but it comes to 2, 4, 5, 3. Some of you didn't get that far. If you tot up the right hand side, it comes to 2, 5, 4, 8. Right take away, no, left take away right gives you minus 95, and the units are kilojoules per mole. Anyone get that right? Yeah, I think I've got lots of people. I was peering from here, it looks like people got that right. So let's pause a sec. So in this last little bit then, we're gonna just recap a little bit on condensation polymerization. Condensation polymerization. And you've got to be able to recognize condensation polymerization. You've got to know a couple of key things about it and some examples of when it happens, right? So the thing about condensation polymerization, and the thing that gets you a dead easy mark, is recognizing there's a byproduct and writing that down when you do the reactions, or write down the reactions. What is the byproduct, folks, of condensation reactions? Right, so we know we're going to generate water in these reactions. And I told you yesterday, I think we did polyester yesterday, right? Nod if that's true. We did polyester yesterday. I don't really want to go through polyester formation again. So we're going to do, I'm going to do a very, very quick recap, so you don't feel like you've got to write this down. The reason I'm going to do it again is going to show you how it's often written in the exam. So I told you that if you're making a polyester, one way to do it is to have a diacid and a dialcohol. What I've done here, though, different to yesterday, is yesterday I drew a proper molecule with CH2 in the middle. This time what I've done is draw it with random shapes in the middle, which is what the exam board likes to do, for reasons that well, I do understand why, because it just means, and it could be any molecule there, any rubbish in the middle, like CH2s, all sorts of things, and the same over here. And when they join together, the way that I got you to learn and practice this is we take OH from here. Do this in the exam, right? Put a ring around the OH of the acid and the H of the alcohol. Clip them together. Right, if you want to write this out again, for emphasis, you can do. Notice that I just copy exactly what's there, minus the thing that I've put a circle around. And that's the two molecules reacting together, but not forgetting the byproduct water, but they join together making that new bond there. That's the bond that we've just made. And so we've got the ester linkage there, and there was a mark in last year's paper for drawing a circle around an ester, and that was it. That's what you have to do. I taught my students last year to put a ring around the carbon next to the oxygen as well, which is the right answer, but that's not what the exam board think, and they know better than me. So there we are. If you want to draw the polymer of that, though, what do you do next? I'm going to pause it. You're going to discuss and then get back to me. Magical answer. You said, so you said put a ring around there. You said put a ring around there, and then put the whole repeat unit in brackets. How many marks would this get, please? So while I'm drawing it, I haven't given you a chance to say anything else, so maybe you were going to say something else. But how many marks out of 3 are we going to give that answer? You need the N. All right, so it gives a bit more. What else is missing? When you say fill it in, what do you mean? Getting there. We've got the N now. We've got an H2O, but there's still a mark missing, isn't there? If you know what 2 words you have to say, or a number and a letter, to get the extra mark, shout them out in 3, 2, 1. 2N, very good. So there's twice as many waters as there are repeat units, because we lost a water when making this bond, and we lost a water when we made this bond here, if you like, which is shown half over here and half over here. I've made a mistake. Did anyone spot it? Who spots the mistake? I do this quite a lot. I do deliberate mistakes to help you spot them. And this, I'm really happy because this is one of the things I'm going to stick on YouTube and people can take the mick out of me from there. What mistake have I made? Tell each other. What is it? What is it, Cressida? Yeah, oxygen missing on the left there. So that shouldn't have been there. I'm going to blame Keir. There we go. So that's the answer. So forgive me. This OH I said should be missing, and I actually drew it. We're very good. So that's your perfect answer. That's difficult, right? So that was a repeat of yesterday. I'm sorry I spent a bit of time on that, but it's worth seeing things twice when they're this difficult. I think. Very, very, very similar to that is when you take a dicarboxylic acid. This is almost identical, but this is now going to be a This is going to be a polyamide this time. So this one's a polyester. So what I drew above was a polyester. What I'm drawing now is going to be a polyamide. I'm going to show it in exactly the same way. The only difference, instead of having a dialcohol, I'm going to have a diamine. All right. A diamine, the word amine is new to you, but you know what ammonia is, right? Ammonia is NH3, and amine is when you've got NH2, and then with a carbon next to it. Oh, what shape should I draw? I should draw a love heart. I'm going to draw a diamond instead, though. There we go. So there's my diamine. And look, this is just like an alcohol, or a dialcohol, except instead of having an OH, it's got an NH2. The difference being nitrogen makes 3 bonds. So when we replace this unit here with this unit, which is what we're doing when we go from polyester to polyamide, instead of having an O there, we're going to have an NH there, and you'll see what I mean in a second. So just like before, I'm going to do 2 stages in one. We're going to take the OHs from either side of the polyamide, the diacid, sorry. And instead of taking, last time we took H, we're going to take H again of that side there. So we're going to be left, instead of O, we're going to have NH. That's it. That's the only difference. And so a polyamide would look like this. There's lots and lots of polymers that are polyamides, but this time the C double bond O is joining to an NH. Then the diamond or love heart if you prefer, and then the N and the H, like that. Apart from that, it's exactly the same. N of those, I should have put N up here as well, shouldn't I? N of those, 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 and then 2N H2O. All right. It's the same thing. So that's a polyamide. And this is again, well, like yesterday we were talking about AB, 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 AB polymers. The repeat unit is unit A and unit B joined together. Right, same sort of idea. Polyamide. And I'm going to put a ring around the amide so that you can do the same thing. And I'd like you to be able to recognise the spot and put a ring around that in your exam, just in case it comes up. There's one other sort of scenario like this that we need to consider, and that's when you've got AAAA polymers. While I wait for you to copy that, I'll pause this. So again, we're showing how condensation polymers form, but there's another scenario that I want you to know. And we said this a bit yesterday. Instead of being an ABAB polymer, like with the diacid and dialcohol and so on, you can have condensation polymers that are just the same unit repeated, AAAA, just like you did with addition polymers yesterday. All right. So that situation is when we've got something like this. We've got a different functional group at either end of the molecule. And this time I'm going to draw a real example of a molecule that can do this. Okay. So if we've got a carboxylic acid at one end of the molecule and then amine at the other end of the molecule, this is a type of molecule you've heard about before in biology. Can anyone recognise what type of molecule that is? So this is an amino acid, and there's lots of types of amino acid, the 20 naturally occurring ones. And amino acids have got an amino at one end and a carboxylic acid at the other, and they're joined with a carbon with at least one hydrogen. If it's got two hydrogens, it's called glycine. If one of these hydrogens is replaced for some sort of side chain, it's then one of the other amino acids like alanine or whatever else, the ones you might have heard of. So amino acids, as you know, clip together with things called peptide bonds, right, to make proteins, yeah? This should be straight from your biology knowledge, and I know Mr. Howard would have covered that in depth, but he would have been calling the bonds peptides. I'm a chemist, so I'll call them amides. So peptides are just amides in proteins. That's all they are. Right. So let's go through exactly the same process we've been doing with the previous examples, and how we join this up and how we make the repeat unit. So what we're going to take off the right hand side, what's going to be lost in this reaction, given it's a condensation polymer, it's going to be what? We're going to lose the OH from one side, and what we're going to lose from the other side. All right, so then we draw the same thing again, but without those things. So we draw NH and then CH. I'm going to draw the H's out full this time, like that, and then COO like that. I'm going to draw the overhanging bond, showing how this repeat unit continues in each direction. Square brackets N, and we've got, how many H2O's would there be this time? One or two or three or none? One, yeah, one. Because we've lost one lot of H2O. So it should be N, shouldn't it? NH2O. You get N of those. This would be a poly amino acid, or in this case polyglycine. But it is an example of a polyamide, right? So polyamide, polypeptide, if you like, it's the same thing. And these are things that are used if you've got a different amino acid each time, say glycine and aniline. Then you know how codons code for, you know how codons in genes code for amino acids, right? This is how they clip together. You've got one amino acid, then another, or another, and another. It's exactly the process that goes on in your body, right? So these can be proteins. And that's kind of, so that's kind of it. We need to do some more examples of these, and we will do when we practice over the next lesson or two. But the key thing you need to know about this from chemistry is you need to know that all biological polymers, so this is the thing that you can make a note of either on your lined paper or on the sheet I've given you. So all biopolymers are condensation polymers. In other words, they all lose water when they form. Condensation polymers. They're not all polyesters or polyamides, although some are polyamides, but they're all condensation polymers. And this is stuff that you know. There's nothing on this page that I think you don't know. What you might not know is that you need to know it for your GCSE chemistry as well in your paper 2. Back end of the paper 2 paper, you might see a few questions like this for a few marks. Amino acids, you know that you've got an amine on one end, you've got carboxylic acid on the other end, and we've got some sort of side chain. What would you call that blob in biology? Have you talked about amino acids in detail in biology? Some sort of side chain or whatever group there. And that defines which amino acid it is, whether it's alanine or proline or glycine or aspartic acid or whatever it might be. But then when you join them together in a long chain, these amino acids, you make a protein. And this will be the primary protein structure, just the order of amino acids in it. And amino acids, the great thing about them is because of the type of intermolecular forces they make, they fold into very specific shapes and then do very specific jobs as well, you know, I'm sure. And the overlap between chemistry and biology is a really fascinating world here. So if you're into kind of a bit of bio, a bit of chemistry, biochemistry is a really fascinating field. We just touched the surface here. So that's that. The reason they fold up as they do is because of the nature of this side chain here. Starch and cellulose is also a condensation polymer. So let's get into the habit of just reminding ourselves every time to write water as a byproduct. If I can remind you of that, even if you can't do any of this, you can pick up an easy mark, right? This is, I mean, a really terrible kind of simplification. But if the monomers are sugar molecules, glucose, say, we can colour them in if you really want to be creative. Oh, there it gets there. So the glucose monomers, or sugar monomers, they join together through a condensation reaction. Water's spat out by the molecule, and the link is made between the monomers, and you get the polymers. The polymers, just like yesterday when we were talking about this in detail, have very different properties to the monomers, right? And you know that, for example, starch and other molecules like cellulose are made up of sugar molecules. Another one you definitely know, and the last one you need to know for your chemistry GCSE, is DNA. And DNA, the absolute crucial word you need to know there for the monomer, so I'd put a big old underline, big star next to this. Learn the word nucleotide, which is the monomer for the polymer DNA. DNA is the polymer, the monomer is nucleotides. And ideally, to layer that up a little bit, and you probably know this anyway from your biology, the nucleotides are essentially made up of three things. The phosphate group, you don't need to know how to draw it. The sugar, which is a ribose sugar. Do you need to know in biology there's a ribose sugar or just sugar? Okay, so it's a sugar. I mean, all ribose means is that it's a five-membered, so it's a five-membered sugar in a particular orientation of the OHs. But anyway, and then you've got a base, and I think I'm sure you know there's four bases that attach to those sugars, and you know what the names of them are. Again, you don't need to know the structure, and they join together through that phosphate linkage each time. So that's the sugar phosphate with the bases hanging off the side, and those bases interact with one another through intermolecular forces that are called hydrogen bonds. We learned that we draw exactly the same thing, just without the double bond. We put a single bond there instead. Magic, cheers, mate. And so we draw two carbon, and it's always a two carbon unit, and we hang two things off each carbon, and it's the same things that are in the monomer. I'm not worried about the box on the right hand side, you can forget that there. The next one is the one that we struggled with yesterday, understandably, and I played a little bit of a game with you in that I didn't tell you the answer, I made you try to think about it. But the naming should be really easy, polypropene. And remember, so how many, I've made a mistake up here as well. What's the mistake that I made? What's the omission that I've made that we need to resolve? N, we've got to have an N there, we put an N there, N there, N there, and so on. So how many carbons do we put in a line between those two brackets? Shout it out. Yeah, easy. It's so easy, isn't it? Two overhanging bonds. And then we've got and that's this carbon. The left hand one of these is this one. The right hand one of these is this one, right? And so, do you want to? So this carbon on the left here is this carbon here. So we're going to hang off two hydrogens, just like the picture on the left. The second carbon is where people go wrong. We've got an H hanging off it, and the other thing that's hanging off it is a CH3. So we have CH3 hanging off it down there. And I've made a mistake. What's the mistake? The N again. Can I ask you to try to fill in a few more of these? I'll wander around and give you a bit of help, and then we'll do a related worksheet either today or in another session. One thing I covered yesterday is when we draw, often in the exams they'll ask you to draw 3 repeating units. You literally draw 3 of these stuck to each other. So you draw 6 carbons, off alternating carbons, you put H, 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 OH, H, 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 OH, like that, okay? So we're dancing a little bit between addition polymers and condensation polymers. So let's have a look at trying to draw some condensation polymers. And this is where I might break your brains a little bit, but that's okay. We're going to get this sorted out and learn and practice. 1, 2, 3 there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 for the road behind you. And 3 there. So we're going to have a go at drawing these condensation polymers, like these ones on here. And what's on the front of this sheet is exactly the same as what we were doing yesterday. We're just going to practice it by working through a few examples. Notice that there'll be polyamides and polyesters, and these notes here through the middle of the page here on polyesters is exactly what we did, and in the same way that we did it more or less, and that you've got blobs between the functional groups at either end, and you lose in the dotted lines here. They've done it slightly differently to me. I put a circle around the OH and the H. They've put a circle around the whole thing together, then clipped it together. Right? So let's have a go at drawing some of these things. A few polyamides there, like I was showing you today. The worksheet, though, is the 3rd page. Right? And all we're going to draw for each of these is the repeating unit. Don't worry about the structure, it's the same thing, really. And so, what we do, the approach is to remind you again, we put a ring around the OH at either side of the acid, put a ring around the H of each of the alcohols and the dialcohol, and then we just draw it. Just literally copy it really carefully with those things missing. So I'm starting with the one on the left, cedar window, then the CH2, and so on. This bond here that I've just drawn is the new one, that one there. I've got an arrow to. And then we copy the right hand molecule. That's going to get 1 mark because I drew the ester, but it's going to drop 2 marks. We're going to go from full marks to 1/3 of the marks. What's missing from this picture? N. And what's the other thing that's missing? 2N water, 2NH2O as well. I want you to get into the habit of doing that, as I keep saying, because I want you to get those easy marks. Have a go at the diamine and diacid underneath and see if you can work out what the products, the monomers were that made that, and there's like 2 pages of these. So have a go at doing that for the last 5 minutes, please. So when you, good question. So when you draw the repeat unit, you draw this thing, but with the bits that I've put a circle around missing, because those things turn into water with the help of the H's from the other molecule. So you draw that on its own, and there it is. That's that. You do the same thing with this thing, with what I've coloured, with what I've crossed out like that. So I've drawn that, and that's here. Now, when you rub out or cross out or don't draw that hydrogen and that OH, you're left with an oxygen with only 1 bond and a carbon with only 3 bonds. So you just join those together. So that bond there, you have clipped those 2 molecules together. So you just draw the same thing, but with essentially, some people draw it like this as well. Maybe to help you see it, that oxygen is bonded to that carbon now. Yeah. That's that bond that I've drawn there. Make sense? Yeah. All right. Yeah, so you put a ring around it and label it as an ester. So this is a polyester because it's loads of esters clipped together in a long chain. I am going to